Okay, really
can.
good, really good. Okay, so I just want to bring everyone through around some news or what's happening with MuleSoft these past few months. Just so you know, right, we are at Mule in 4.3. Just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of the different versions that are out there, the different support timeframes, the standard support timeframe, extended support timeframe, so that you can plan any sort of builds or migrations for you or your customers around some of these, so you keep the support from MuleSoft and with the appropriate runtime version. So just wanted to show that. That is available with some of these links here at this next slide. So just wanted to be sure that we're all aware of those and we plan accordingly. All right. And so the next thing I want to spend some time around is our new support for multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication is able to be enabled in the Anypoint administration. So it is a built-in capability, no extra cost. It's very simple and easy and quick to enable at any point. You may have seen some articles about how to make that work and such. I just want to bring that up. There's a series of steps and such that you can find documentation on. I want to share with you a video from our Friends of Macs series that go through the actual steps for how to enable multi-factor authentication and the value of it. All right, so let me go ahead and start this video. And while that's starting, share out the video tab. All right, and I'm going to press play, and you should be able to hear the video. And Jim, if you can just signal a thumbs up if you can hear the video at the time the video starts. Not yet. All right, let me try that again.
Yeah, I think we have to share the tab.
Yeah, that was the mistake. Let's try that again. All right, second time's the charm.
Hello friends of Macs, my name is Ravi Padmanavar. I'm a customer success architect at MuleSoft. And today we're going to discuss about how to improve the login security of Anypoint platform using multi-factor authentication. So let's get started. On one hand, we are living through unprecedented times of COVID-19 crisis, and on the other hand, the digital transformation phenomena. In both the cases, organizations are forced to respond rapidly to an entirely new set of business challenges. On top of that, organizations are facing immense security challenges during all digital work from anywhere times. Protecting account access is very critical. Let's look at some of the numbers to understand why. An average enterprise consists of 900 plus applications and systems, most of which are secured via login credentials. More than 81% of the data breaches that happen across the world are due to the compromised login credentials. Attacks such as those on Target in 2013, Equifax in 2017, and Colonial Pipeline as recent as May 2021 could have been easily prevented with multiple layers of login security. Also, let's acknowledge the fact that majority of the users are guilty at some point of time of setting up a weak or used password or not taking additional measures to secure the accounts, thereby putting our data and enterprise at great risk. So the intriguing question is, how can we improve the Anypoint platform security? Wikipedia defines multi-factor authentication as an electronic authentication method in which a user is granted access to a website or application only after successfully presenting two or more pieces of evidence. At MuleSoft, we take protection of customers' data very seriously. Security is at the epicenter of every product and solution that we build, and not just an afterthought. Multi-factor authentication is now the integral part of Anypoint platform login security. It allows to secure accounts at login in layers through additional verification methods. Use of authentication apps, security keys, or biometric authentication as a verification method helps to balance security and user convenience. It is one of the simplest and most effective way to protect your customer and business critical data. MFA is an out-of-the-box security feature available to all of our customers at no additional cost. Think of it as a combination of one, something that you already know, such as login credentials, which by the way rarely changes, and two, something that you have, such an authenticator app or a security key, which generates random code and which changes frequently, thus making it highly unlikely for attackers to gain access to your account. The question is not whether one should implement a MFA, but rather how soon one should embrace to safeguard your entire integration infrastructure. With that, let's look at some of the most important upcoming releases and features related to multi-factor authentication. The MFA was first released by MuleSoft in November 2020 as an opt-in feature. Starting August 2021, the users will be prompted to use MFA. By late August 2021, all new organizations created and the users invited will be automatically MFA enabled. In the first half of 2022, any new user added to existing organization will be auto-enabled for MFA. And by the end of 2022, all platform users will be enabled for MFA. In 2023 timeframe, multi-factor authentication will be a mandatory feature in any point platform for all of the users. Let's quickly understand the different ways to set up users to access any one platform and identify who is responsible for setting up MFA. Access to any point platform is provided via either the login credentials, that is username and password maintained by any point platform, or via a single sign-on. The party responsible for implementing MFA differs based upon the login method. For non-SSO users, turn on MFA directly in the Anypoint platform itself. And for SSO users, use SSO provider's MFA service to turn it on. Note that the rest of the video focuses on how to enable MFA for non-SSO users of Anypoint platform. Launching MFA is a two-step process. First, org admin will turn on MFA for the entire organization. Once turned on, the users will not be able to log into Anypoint platform until they configure MFA. And second, users will then have to obtain and set up at least one verification method. Let's see how org admin can enable MFA for the entire organization. Log into the Anypoint platform with org admin permissions and click Access Management. From the left navigation menu, click Multi-Factor Authentication link. Select Required Radio button and click on Save. Bingo! MFA is enabled. Next time, when user logs into Anypoint platform, they are prompted to configure the verification method if it's not already configured. Let's see how a user can obtain and register a verification method. User must register at least one verification method. Step 1 is to obtain a verification method such as the Authenticator app, which the user must then download and install on their devices. And step 2 is to then register this method. Note that registration process is automatically initiated upon login and it guides user at every step. Thereafter, every time user logs in with a username and a password, they are prompted to provide additional verification. Let's look at the different verification method that the organization can choose from. You can configure Salesforce Authenticator app or third-party authenticator apps such as Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, or Authy. These apps generate time-based one-time password that user needs to provide when logging into Anypoint platform. Another option is to register a USB security key such as YubiKey or Titan security key. Please note that this is a physical device and need to be procured by the organization. You can also use a built-in biometrics authenticator such as a Windows Hello or Touch ID. Note that MuleSoft doesn't support email, SMS, or phone-based verification methods as they can be easily compromised or intercepted. In the next section, we learn on how to exempt certain accounts from setting up MFA. Before we see how to exempt an account, let's try to understand the different types of accounts and which one qualify for exemption. User accounts are login accounts created for the individual users, such as architects, leads, developer, tester, etc., who log into the Anypoint platform website to build APIs and integration. While service accounts are created for the purpose of providing access to the external systems or applications such as CI/CD tools, MuleSoft metrics accelerator app, bots, etc., to provide access to the Anypoint platform programmatically. MFA should only be enabled for user accounts and not for service account. Before enabling MFA organization-wide, identify all such service accounts and replace them with a connected app to avoid any service disruption. Connected apps is a feature available in the access management to authorize apps to make programmatic calls to Anypoint platform. For more detail, watch Friends of Max video on connected apps. But in the meantime, you can easily exempt these service accounts from MFA requirement while enabling the rest of the organization. Let's see how. Log into the Anypoint platform with org admin permissions and click Access Management. From left navigation menu, click Multi-Factor Auth. Search and add the service account that you want to exempt and click on Save. That's it. The service account is exempt from MFA while rest of the user accounts are still MFA enabled. The org admin can manage and monitor the users of the organization. Users module also displays information about users, those are MFA enabled, users that are invited to set up MFA, and the users that are exempt from MFA. Org admins can easily determine the progress of MFA adoption via users module and drive them towards improved security goal. As mentioned earlier, security is at the core of every product and solutions that MuleSoft offers, and Anypoint Studio is no different. Anypoint Studio IDE now seamlessly integrates with Anypoint platform account secured using MFA so that it can build, consume, and publish reusable assets such as API specs, examples, templates, and connectors. Go to Preferences, Anypoint Platform, Authentication menu on our IDE and add the login account as shown in the first screenshot. In case you're facing any issues, try changing the default browser from built-in to native to make it work. And that's it. Let's quickly recap. Today we learned about what multi-factor authentication is, how it significantly improves the login security of an Anypoint platform, and how easy it is to set it up across an organization with few click of button. If you have any further question, please visit docs.mulesoft.com or reach out to your MuleSoft team. Thanks a lot for watching Friends of Max video. See you next time.
All right, very good video. So there's a lot of Friends of Max videos. If you would look at the link that I put into the chat, you can see that it's really just a search, Friends of Max, and there's 50 plus already, and additional videos are being produced all the time. So really great resource, good learning resource, learning some good tips. All right, so a few other things.
Hey, Mike, quick question for you about the going back to the MFA. So if you had an organization that was just getting started and you participate a lot in the pre-sales phase and working with customers as they onboard MuleSoft, would you recommend that from the start that they just set up their environment with MFA?
Of course, yeah, for maximum security, right? So
at this point,
yeah, because right, the entire premise, right, of Anypoint is that Anypoint makes it easy for access to business data in a governed way, right? So you want to be sure that the authentication to key business data is protected as that possibly could be. So MFA, two-factor authentication and such is a very secure, more secure than just username and password. So that would be a default suggestion. Yes, enable MFA from the start. Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. All right. Well, let's see. I'm gonna have to change my sharing so that you can see the few slides again. Right, everyone should be able to see a slide deck again, a slide deck. So I showed you how you can find all the Friends of Max videos you may ever want to find, and additionals will be placed there. There are a few that are new. So the video you just saw referenced connected apps. So how to create a connected app to replace a service account. Really good video. That could be a next one that you want to watch. These are the top 5 videos from August. So look for those. Just wanted to show that so you can see what some of the videos are, what some trending ones are, and we'll have a list like this for each of the future meetups too. So I'd be curious to hear what some of your favorites were at any point as well. So that the product teams love that kind of feedback. So I'd appreciate any favorites you have that you'd share. And Jim said you can always catch up with me at LinkedIn or email Jim, or LinkedIn is a good way too. So we'd love to hear what your thoughts are. The last few things I want to share is around the on-demand webinar. So our product team produces a quarterly roadmap webinar, and if you go to the link, and I'm going to put the link into the chat too, you can sign up and find out what the future roadmap webinar is. And the last was made available in August of 2021. So you can see all the planned product innovations around MuleSoft. So a good place if you want to keep a pulse on what's new or what's around the corner and such. And so I will paste the link into the chat. And then last is our Dreamforce event. And so Dreamforce is an event that Salesforce puts together, a virtual event. There's going to be a lot of material around MuleSoft, what's new with MuleSoft. So that's in another 2 weeks. And you can sign up and register for that and see what some of the MuleSoft content is. So look for a link to it in the chat stream. All right, so that's it, what I wanted to cover. Happy to answer any questions before we have Graham, our keynote, take over with his. Any questions?
Feel free to come off mute if you are if you have audio video available. Come off mute and you can ask in person, or just like Mike said, drop a message in the chat, and we'll get to it. I have one. Let me look for. One point that I'd like to just mention. So for you guys that that maybe have thought about presenting in the future at a Houston MuleSoft meetup, you know, one of the great ways to kind of think about this is go to those few Friends of Max videos and some of these training events, and put it in your own words, right? Like think about, like, the more you can do it yourself, then and be able to explain it to someone else, the better you're going to internalize it and learn that material, right? And so the bonus is here's the bonus. So if you present a topic in the future, then we're gonna give you basically a prize set, or not a prize set, but it's basically some swag that goes with that. And so any presenter that helps us out in these community meetups, they are eligible to receive training, a training course, I believe, and then and I believe that our MuleSoft community folks will send out a swag. Usually if when we were in person, it was a nice mug, so you'd get your MuleSoft mug, but just keep that in mind. And it's really easy, just using some of the material that's out there, you know, work on that and come up with a presentation that you can share in your own words, because we're all looking for someone to explain it a little bit differently than others have done it, and build your own test case, your own samples, and share that with us. So let's see, that's it. Paracoda, I hope I said that name right. You're asking about MCIA training courses. So yes, no, two ways. So one is be a presenter. That's sort of the surefire way if you present material. The second way is to win at trivia. So here pretty shortly, we're going to do some trivia classes based on, or trivia questions based on the material that you're seeing here today, and be a winner, and you'll be able to get a voucher. And that voucher is good for any training that MuleSoft delivers. So yes, that can even be used for the MCIA training course. In fact, we have one of our regular attendees here is Divyesh Patel. DP, you used one of those, one of your winning vouchers for an MCIA course, haven't you? Or you may not have taken it yet, but that was the one you signed up for, right?
Yes, I did use that. In fact, earlier I have used my MCD self-training and use only the voucher to appear for MCD certification.
Fantastic. Yeah. So definitely jump on that, Paracoda. And if you don't win today with the trivia, drop me an email and let's talk about, if you want to do some training, because it sounds like as a MuleSoft developer, you could help us do some not training, but presenting a session in one of these future meetups. With that, Mike, you want to unshare, and then we'll have Graham. I'll let you take it away, and you can share your screen.
Thank you, everyone. Any questions anytime, happy to answer. All right.
Awesome. All right, Graham, you are up.
All right, let me start the video here. I think we should get some stuff going here. Good morning, folks. So the title of this kind of session that I'm going to go through with you is what to do when the house is on fire. Production issue identification, resolution, and prevention. So the presenter, myself, a little bit about me. I got my first computer when I was rather young. It was a really dusty 386, and ever since then, I've been heavily involved with technology. It's something that I really haven't given up since then. I've been working in the technology space since I was 15, working at a LAN gaming cafe and a small computer shop that was in town doing repairs and troubleshooting and building new systems for customers. After finishing school, I got into the IT space a little bit more formally and professionally, and I've been captivated by the integration space for sure. Now, in my spare time, I tend to find home improvement projects. My poor wife comments quite frequently about the state of the house, and particularly the garage, which is also my office, because I just like to keep busy like that. I absolutely love and adore horror, and I have been religiously falling asleep to horror stories for like the last 6 years, which sounds terrible, but I find audio drama kind of soothing in that matter. And a big thing for me that kind of spoke to this space is I love problem solving. Um, Software for me was a unique approach to solving problems, and that's really what kind of took me in. So what we're going to kind of cover over the next little bit here is production issue identification, resolution, and prevention. So kind of the outcome from this is I want to be able to pass on these slides as well as some other resources as well to you to utilize within your company or with your clients, depending on your role with MuleSoft. And so one thing that I've kind of found is that uh, in most situations, I find that as soon as something goes wrong, people panic. And this was kind of the target of kind of this presentation. When Jim asked me to do a presentation and told me to find something that I was passionate about or I could speak about, this was an easy one that kind of came to me for sure. So when we talk about issue identification, what do we mean? So to take you back to grade school and those early English classes is kind of the 5 Ws. And so in this case, who broke it? What broke? Where did it break? Why did it break? When did it break? And the kind of additional tag along there is how did it break? When we encounter a production issue, and that is coming to us as technologists, is that these questions have value. Now, the value in the answers to them help us not only solve the problem, but look a little bit deeper on how we can improve. So typically, when a production issue occurs, there are a lot of drivers to people's reactions. Um, and a few of those are it costs money, it costs time, and it costs reputation for either your company or your client. This tends to drive people's emotions up quite quite high, and that creates stressful situations. Now, when we're looking at the costs of a production issue, production outage, I may use these things interchangeably, is that leaders and the organization will be looking to seek those 5 Ws and our add-on H. And the reason that we want to work to kind of answer these is that we want to be proactive in the future. We want to avoid having these issues. We want to avoid having these outages. We want to answer these to kind of provide clarity and support to what we're working on. A lot of what we do as technologists, and especially in the integration space, is an improvement on business process and procedure, and finding ways to simplify how that works within an organization. People also naturally gravitate to the context, to the information. Despite the old adage of curiosity kills the cat, we are naturally looking for answers to questions. It is a big driver of kind of the human condition. And providing these answers allows you to build trust, not only with like your internal team, but also with individuals within those teams and those organizations. So when we kind of consider our overall arching questions here, let's break it down a little bit further. So when we think about, for example, who broke it, is why are we answering this question? When can we answer it? What tools can assist us? Who can assist us, if anyone? Where can we find the information to provide our answer? And how do we communicate it? Recursion is great, isn't it? And so we're going to kind of cover the following. I may end up speeding through some of this as the information is quite lengthy. And what I'm kind of looking for is, folks, as we kind of go through this, is unfortunately I can't keep an eye on chat just due to where everything is. But please unmute your mic, interrupt me at any time, and ask questions as we kind of go through this. I want to kind of have this as an engaging session. And previously I had a demo environment and little lab setup that was supposed to demonstrate some of this. However, in true fashion, at about 1:30 in the morning, I ran out of caffeine and still haven't fixed my configuration problem. So let's look at kind of one for an example is who broke it. Um, so when we break this down a little bit further into kind of our little recursive framework is who can assist us. Now, I'm sure we've all heard our lovely praise about fixing the internet router, um, or just remembering to plug the power cord in for our grandparents and elderly relatives. But we all have gaps in our knowledge. We do not know everything, and we may not have access to anything outside of the integration space, depending on the organization or client. It has been shown that typically when we look at building relationships and trust with anyone, really, is that asking for help is a surefire way to kind of create that engagement and start that communication line. And in the grand scheme of things, different perspectives allow us to be critical of our own thoughts and approaches. The perspective change can often give us a different path to a solution, and it may unblock us from something that is causing us to just kind of spin our tires. When we think of tools that can assist us, this is going to be kind of a recurring theme. But when we're talking about who broke something, logging is a very, very handy tool. It is the favorite thing of developers and operations' worst nightmare, typically because we put too much stuff in. Operations goes to look at a system log and it's 10 gigabytes and it's been like 3 hours. And that usually causes someone to have a panic attack. Monitoring tools, external monitoring tools for application management, things like New Relic, or in the kind of the scope of the MuleSoft Anypoint platform, we have Anypoint monitoring, for example. Documentation. Every developer's probably first or second most hated task, depending on how you feel about testing. But documentation is extremely valuable. The documentation provides us information that we can add, examine to start tracing things through, and start adding information to our overall answer that we're going to provide on who broke it. Now, where do we find this information to provide our answers? Using our tools, obviously, will give us an output that we can action, and also working with those other people that are assisting us. Now, the why are we answering this? When we're talking about who broke something, when we we're answering this because if we know the mechanism, human or otherwise, in the case of integration, often like input or output systems, when we know what that mechanism is that's caused the issue, it allows us to kind of focus our efforts. And to be honest, I do have a eternal love for Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes, and this is extremely risk averse compared to trying to do real crime solving. Now, communication. I believe that communication is something that, especially under a high stress scenario, is something that gets disregarded first, because we are more concerned with the problem and less concerned with how we discuss a problem. So a couple of things to remember is that we are all human, and therefore we are all prone to human error. Mistakes happen. They will happen to you, they will happen to others, and we want to be conscious of this. And we are all people. We need to treat each other with respect. When we talk about things related to the who broke it, we don't want to be antagonistic. We don't want to paint someone with a target like they are the bad guy. Again, kind of going back to the first point under communication is that we are all human and we can make mistakes. And so what we want to try to do is minimize that antagonistic and overly critical language, And we want to explain the who in a way that gives context to the answer without necessarily isolating and painting a target on someone's back. So, for example, if Mark from accounting is responsible for his month-end spreadsheet being submitted as a CSV, and during that stressful time and lack of caffeine, he has saved it as a different document format as an XLSX, and it breaks the integration. Um, when we talk about how do we communicate this out, we want to use language like when we investigated the issue reported to us, we found a mistake that was made during a stressful month-end process that the account department performs, and the file is used by the integration layer was saved in an incorrect format. That gives the answer to who broke it in a general standpoint, but doesn't necessarily paint a target on Mark's back. Now, when we use this kind of tactful approach, we are building that trust and we are building that relationship with others that we work with. And maybe the next time that we decide to go out for coffee, Mark will finally pay for our orange mocha frappuccino instead of always letting us pay. Now, when can we answer this? Again, because we're working in a high stress scenario, and we are going to have people reaching out to us and constant communication lines during this process, is we want to make sure that when we provide an answer of who broke something, we need to have a reasonable amount of certainty on where or who this event originated with. That being said, we can provide updates on kind of looking into this particular section of an issue, but we want to avoid speculation. When we consider, again, the costs of an issue, emotion tends to cloud how we approach a situation, and we don't want to have an unpredictable result by maybe identifying incorrectly the source of the problem and having a leader within the stressful scenario make a decision that is based on speculation. And then the old adage of making assumptions is one to keep in mind in this case, is that having the details here will stop this kind of nasty scenario from occurring. So we've kind of covered quickly on the who side of things, and I suppose when I think about the next thing that, or maybe the first thing that kind of comes up is what broke. So an error shows up in our log, and something's not working. So again, we're going to go back to our kind of recursion framework here, is that who can assist us? When we're looking to answer what broke, we may not have access to the same amount of resources in some of our other scenarios. This is because typically within integration, like we are specialists, and even more so within the MuleSoft space, we are definitely further specialized than probably some of our other teammates within like an IT organization or even within a client project. So our first look should be to our teammates, to others who are working in the same role. Now, during the course of our investigation, if our tools kind of indicate that we're working in a specialty area, we should look to reach out to subject matter experts with the particular area in mind. And so what I mean by that is, for example, if we go back to Mark and the accounting break, if we find that, hey, you know what, our integration related to month-end financial transaction synchronization is broken, we want to contact the accounting department. We want to talk to business analysts that are involved with the accounting department. We want to talk to managers. We want to talk to the people that are on the ground. these people will help us be able to look at what should be there and what isn't there and what was done prior to the breakage. What tools can we use? Again, this is going to start to kind of look like a very repetitive thing, is that our logging, our monitoring, and our documentation are a solid foundation for us to build on. And in addition to this is that in a production issue scenario, we do usually have a work management tool that will have a ticket with some details, and that may give us an idea of who to talk to or what system to look at. Again, where do we find this information? Our tools and the people that we're working with. They're going to give us the context, especially when we're dealing with a specialty area. That is going to be a very important thing. We tend to work in a number of different departments, a number of different verticals, and when we're working with these people, we don't necessarily have the full domain knowledge of what it is that we're developing. We have a set of specifications, we have some acceptance criteria, and we have a use case to work against. But that doesn't mean that you understand all of the linguistics and the process behind enterprise financials. So why are we answering this? When we answer what broke, we are isolating the component or components that we need to address. Again, an issue has occurred. Eventually, we're going to have to resolve it. So answering what broke allows us to actually look at what it is that we're going to have to fix. When we answer what broke, we also can now look at how we approach the resolution, and we'll kind of get onto this a little bit later. How do we communicate this? As kind of the first point says, is that this is what people are going to be looking for an answer for, probably first more than anything. The only thing that will come second to this is when is it going to be fixed? And that's not even a part of our framework because we're not going to necessarily deal with the time aspect of this until later. During our communication, we need to make sure to provide details or evidence that has led to this conclusion. Especially when we're working in integration, we are working with almost every IT kind of specialty. We're working with database administration, we're working with storage, we could be working with infrastructure, we may be working with an ERP team. Because of this, we want to make sure that we're providing the details and evidence that kind of allow us to come to our conclusion. And most importantly, when we're talking about what broke, depending on an organization's approach to production issues and what that looks like from a response side, you may be addressing members that are not technically inclined, such as the accounting team, supply management, inventory. Again, when you're working, especially in the corporate IT world, these interactions tend to be less with technical folks and more with business folks. And so you need to keep that in mind when you're trying to create your message, that your audience may not be familiar with what a Java stack trace is. And when can we answer this? We answer it when we can be very specific about what it is that broke. So we have identified the component that has caused or experiencing the incident, and we are reasonably sure that this is where the problem lies. Now, there are situations where there's cascading effects, or one component affects the other. In that case, we want to just try to get to a reasonable point of, like, saying, for example, users can't log in. Well, users can't log in is a very generic problem. And so when we look at seeing what actually broke, was it the web page that broke? Was it the APIs that are responsible for this authentication that broke? Or was it something else entirely? Maybe there was a network issue. We need to kind of dig into things a little bit using our tool set here and try to find roughly where things broke in order to kind of provide that context back. Now, quickly, and where did it break? This kind of sounds like what broke. In this case, it is a more granular way to kind of look at what has broken. Now, kind of feeding this particular approach is where did it break? Is that we should try to identify what broke or who broke it. If we can identify what broke, we can look to other members or SMEs that are more knowledgeable or involved with these component systems to try to help us. We can look at our answers and the details that we've gained by doing what broke to help us start to isolate system perspective where to dive a little bit deeper. And at this point, it is worthwhile to note that it is possible that there is a broken process and not broken technology. In integration, you are dealing with basically the technological implementation of a human process. And so it is entirely possible that the start point for your integration, like in the case of Mark from accounting, is a human process of saving a spreadsheet that triggers the ingestion of a CSV file. It is entirely possible that the human side of this has broken, and this is what caused the problem. It's worthwhile to keep this in mind as we start working through production issues, is that it is not always the technology that has the core problem. What tools can assist us? Again, our logging, documentation, and application monitoring. Our answers of who broke it and what broke. And also, because we're starting to get to a more detailed level at this point, is we're going to start looking a little bit more specifically at the source code of our implementation and our systems. Now, where do we find the information to provide our answers? Again, our tool outputs, the people who are assisting us, and our source code investigation. These outputs will help us kind of narrow down what it is within our system from a component perspective that is broken. Why are we answering this? Well, we are looking to find the source of our problem. The source of our problem isn't always necessarily the root cause, but they can be depending on the situation. The other part of this is when we're talking about where to break is we want to see if there's a gap between our technical solution and our process. At that point, it allows us to address both of those separately and with different approaches. And we want to further isolate and target our solution. Again, more on this in a little bit. How are we communicating this out? We're aiming to provide decision makers with context and with details. Decision makers need to be able to have as much information at their fingertips as possible in order to figure out how best to resolve the incident or issue. And when we're doing this communication, we need to ensure that we are specific and we are concise. If we are too long-winded, people are not going to read our 3-paragraph explanation of all of the pieces that broke throughout this entire thing. We want to keep that tailored in order to offer the information without overloading a decision maker, because they're going to have a lot of things coming to them at once and a lot of information. They need to be able to process and make a decision based on that information in a reasonable amount of time. So when can we answer this? When we have isolated the responsible component within our system and can reproduce the incident reliably and accurately. At this point, we do not need to know why did it break. We just need to know that something broke. So for example, if there was a change to a data model for our API spec, and we go through, we made our change to our API spec, that's fantastic, we deploy it, people start using our APIs, and we're getting consistent 500 errors, and the users can no longer use this API endpoint. When we're talking about where did it break, the breakage is occurring within our API. Specifically because we've updated a data model and we maybe did not take the time to go through and update transformations, for example. And so when our data weave kicks off, we're mapping a null field because it's gone and the data weave component is blowing up. And so now we have isolated that, and we know that that's where the problem is. We might not know the why of it, but we can see that, hey, you know what? This data weave is constantly throwing an error. I'm going to have to investigate this further. So why are we doing this kind of 5 whys and an H framework and kind of the recursion? Is that production issues are rarely small in nature. And they're definitely not small in the chaos that they cause. I have been dragged into a war room with 25 people, with way too many people talking, trying to solve what was the equivalent of someone executed a start script on a WebLogic server as a root user, and that caused a whole ton of problems as it continued to execute through a bunch of bash script integration to bring up applications. That person may have been me, but that's besides the point. When we're using this framework, we are able to action one vector of this issue at a time. And so we can really focus and drill down and deliver well-defined results. Why the recursion? Some of you have probably correctly identified that this is very similar to kind of the approach to a fishbone diagram. And the recursive questioning is thought-provoking. What it's asking you to do is to make sure that you have reached the crux or the bottom of what we are analyzing. Have you finally reached a point where you can no longer ask what or why or who? At that point, we have probably gotten to the root cause of our issue, and that allows us to move forward in a more strategic manner. As we continue to ask these questions, we're helping kind of develop our context when we're communicating out to other people that are involved during these production issues. That context and that information allows us to really make well-informed decisions and well-designed solutions to problems. Also, I just have a thing for owls. I think they're pretty cool. So we're going to kind of move on to the next topic here, and this is where kind of some of our pieces are going to start to link together. So our house is on fire. How are we going to stop the house from being on fire? So in my opinion, when we're talking about production issue resolution, is that these really come in two formats, tactical and strategic. There's also the option of doing absolutely nothing, which typically does not go over well. So what are we going to kind of cover is what are these fixes? When should I use them? What are the upsides to using this particular resolution approach? And what are the risks? In terms of a tactical fix is a resolution that solves the blockage that is occurring due to an incident. That is really the absolute best definition that I can give to that. And at its core, the tactical fix is meant to resume the operations of a technical system with as little as effort as possible and as quick as possible. For example, if your users are unable to log into your application, just due to the cost of what's occurring during this issue or outage, it may be in the best interest of yourself and the organization to just get users logged in. So you may put in a nasty, quick, dirty fix to something to get users to be able to log in again, because the resolution is more important than the root cause. Again, when we're doing these issue resolutions and we're evaluating approaches, is we are looking to create a resolution that fits the costs of the issue. So our upside is that, hey, you know what? The production issue and blockage is resolved quickly and we're costing very little. So that cost, you know, again, could be monetary, could be reputation, it could be time. And unfortunately, in the corporate IT world, IT is still considered a cost center. And so when we're talking about time, it is not only the time that the outage is occurring, but the time that you as a developer or integration specialist is spending to resolve the problem. What are the downsides? Because we're trying to resume the operation quickly, we are most likely not going to address the root cause, and the underlying issue is going to remain. Again, we are aiming to unblock and bring the system back online, not necessarily start addressing the deeper issues. Because we are trying to meet a tight time objective and we are looking to resume the operation, testing and validation will be limited. It is very rare that you would be able to implement a tactical fix and go through your standard process. When we're going through because we're kind of avoiding our standard process for development, release management, things of that nature, the appropriate checks and balances are not observed. And so this will always add technical debt and introduces cognitive overhead into the code base. What I mean by cognitive overhead is that because you have implemented a quick, dirty fix in order to get the system up and running, chances are it is not following your best practices for design patterns, for architectural consistency, and for clarity. Again, you're trying to get things up and running. You're not necessarily concerned with how pretty it looks. Strategic fix. So when I'm talking about a strategic fix, I'm thinking about a well thought out resolution that resolves the identified issue and also addresses the root cause that was responsible for this specific occurrence. You should probably look to doing these strategic fixes when the cost to addressing our issue is lower than the cost of the incident and the cost of a reoccurrence. And the cost of the reoccurrence would be higher than what you are currently spending to do this strategic fix. So what do I mean by that? I mean that the time that you're going to spend to do this, the time that you take to follow the proper process that you have within your organization or with your client as an agreement and work through these validations and controls, that overall cost is lower than what the incident is going to cost overall, as well as when we consider the chance of this occurring again, if that cost is higher than what it takes to actually spend the time to fix this properly, then we want to use a strategic fix. There is a client that I worked with in the past that had a very, very nasty reputation of excessive downtime with many of their systems. And so having an outage occur again and again and again starts to damage the reputation of that client and of that company. And they start to lose business revenue because of that. So when we consider resolving problems, we want to make sure that this is something that is taken into consideration when we're picking an issue resolution approach. What are upsides is that we are typically trying to address the root cause of the incident, and we are trying to reduce the occurrence of this happening again. Eliminating it obviously is the ideal state, but it more often than not, it could happen again. We just want to make sure it's not likely to occur. Now, because we typically, when we're approaching things with a strategic fix, our time constraint is not as important as a factor. And so because we're following this proper process for our development, for our change management controls, things of that nature, we are ensuring a more stable fix. Again, because we're following this process, we are maintaining kind of the cognitive requirements for understanding the system and its functionality. Again, if you are maintaining a fix that follows your design patterns, your architectural patterns and consistency, and is clear and well thought out, it is much easier to read going forward. And because we're doing this, we are not incurring technical debt. What are our downsides? The biggest downside really is that we are costing this kind of a resolution has a higher cost to it. There is no way around that. We are going to incur that cost for how long we take to do this and basically the rigor around our process. So why can't I? So why can't I just use tactical fixes and then do strategic fixes after when we have time? I have run into one client in the last 8 years that has actually allocated time to resolve technical debt. It is very rare that we are allocated the time to go through and fix that. When we consider a tactical fix, we're introducing this cognitive overhead, and we may not be the only person in the code base and the only person that is responsible for maintaining the operation of the system or doing net new development. And so when we introduce this technical debt and we're increasing our cognitive overhead on the overall code base, others may have difficulty interpreting what we have done. And it may be even more difficult for a new person to this particular issue to do a proper strategic fix, because what you've done is quick and dirty and it might not make sense. Root cause is important. So the example here is that if you keep performing tactical fixes for a particular endpoint system because they take a Wild West approach to the release process, you are committing through compliance to being responsible for the technical debt that is incurred. You may also start to become the target when incidents occur for integrations or operations that occur against or with this system by never addressing where the issue is coming from. And I'm sure, as your father always said, do it right the first time or don't do it at all. Not always the case, but why not? Why don't I always use strategic fixes? Because I like to solve problems. Time is money. That is something that I'm sure that you have all heard multiple times, and especially when we're considering operational downtime, it is something that will be at the forefront of everyone's mind. The root cause of an incident is not always apparent. When you're committing to this course of action, you are committing to diving down to actually find where the problem exists. And that can take a lot of time. Again, if our issue and our outage is costing time and it is dragging that out, that can damage the reputation. And that reputation is not only to the company themselves, but you as a technologist and what you're able to do within your scope. The Pareto principle is considered dogma for delivery for a reason, is that sometimes good enough is better than perfect. So when we've considered kind of our issue identification and our issue resolution, how do we prevent these things from occurring? And why is it important? So if I have to sit in another war room for 10 hours straight, I may start a real war. The longest I've been in a in a production outage war room is 23 hours straight during an ERP outage at year end for financials prior to the company's acquisition. I don't think I've ever consumed so much Red Bull in my entire life. And it was an experience that I am not eager to repeat. Because middle of the night phone calls interrupt my beauty sleep. I think that's a pretty much given. Everybody loves sleep. That interruption is distracting. And Alan Jackson keeps telling me that it's 5 o'clock and I have somewhere to be. Is a valid reason to not want to continue to deal with production issues. Jokes aside, is that these outages have costs. Again, when we go back to kind of our 5 Ws and the driving factors in terms of issue resolution, is that these are monetary, reputation, and time related, and can have other costs as well. System stability gives us a foundation to build upon, and helps achieve the maturity within your organization or your client's organization. If the system is dependable, it is functional, and it is stable, it allows you to look at other things to spend your team's time on, such as learning and innovation. That learning and innovation time alone can improve the performance of your team and the organization, as well as shifting the mood of the people that are participating as well. So what are some approaches to kind of this issue prevention? So here are some areas that can kind of be considered. Process and procedure, implementations within our system, and implementation of our system. Now, when I'm speaking of our system, I'm talking our integration layer in this particular case, our anypoints, our anypoint network, and the components that are utilized specifically for our MuleSoft implementation. And so what are we going to cover? What does this mean specifically? Why is it important to our prevention process? What does this look like as an example or as a tool set, and what can we gain? Process and procedure is the foundation of what we do. When we're considering issue prevention, is that this process and procedure is king. Our integration systems are literally designed to basically do a technological conversion of a human process, or to be an addition to a human process. And the rigor of the structure provides the ability to have checks and balances during key points. When you think about signing over documents or financial transactions, there are usually signing authorities involved. A check and balance is ensuring that that signing authority is actually doing the signing through digital signatures, for example. Process and procedure usually leads to visualization and the start of discussion. What do I mean by that is that if you were to draw out a process for how month-end works for accounting, it allows you to see the steps as different components, different pieces, and it allows you to see like where possible breakages can occur and what can you do to mitigate those. So what does this look like for us? Even just from a straight technology standpoint, developer workflow. So for example, if you follow a Git flow within your project, there are checks and balances in place during that process in order to allow for different things to occur and to validate that as you're moving through this workflow, that things are in a state that meets quality and ensures standards. Release management is much the same way when we think about how we move things between environments. There are checks and balances in place and gates prior to deploying to production. That helps it prevent issues from occurring. Having our QA and testing workflow. Again, the QA team, fantastic people, love them to bits and pieces. They may drive me nuts, but they make sure that when these issues occur, that it's not something that's just out of the box. Change management process also allows for something to be validated, be discussed, and be presented to multiple people to ensure that impacts are minimized. What are we gaining? When we kind of enforce the idea of process and procedure, we're creating repeatable and defined behavior. And so this allows for our results to actually be analyzed and our problems to be addressed based on the evidence of that analysis. And these repeated behaviors create cohesion between members of a team that are following the framework and allows for consistency to be achieved. Implementations within our system. So when we're talking about this, I'm talking about components that can be utilized within our technical systems and their tool set. Why is this important? When we are using what we have within a defined tool set to take action within our systems, we are inherently enhancing the capability to use when an issue arises. These are also low-hanging fruit for us. It allows us to already use what we have without expanding, without purchasing anything, and allows us to already have something available and something that is standard. So what does this look like? Things like logging standards and frameworks. A good example would be MuleSoft's JSON logger. The extensibility of that component is amazing, and it allows you to really tailor what information you have available at your hands. Detailed and extensive unit testing. I managed to make it through about let's see, about 6.5 years before I actually had to sit down and do unit testing, and actually do really good unit testing. Now I'm really confused how I made it as far as I did without so many more problems. But that unit testing is going to help us. Using documented and defined development patterns or design patterns, such as a singleton pattern, etc. Using enterprise integration patterns. These are constructed in a way that they can be referenced, they can be looked up, and they are considered standards. And we can be able to use these to create repeatable behavior within our systems, and it doesn't cost us anything. Another one that tends to get maybe shoved off a little bit is a well-defined and extensive exception error handling framework. Things will break eventually. So when they break, we want to make sure that we have as much information at our fingertips as possible. What can we gain? Stability by using our tool set fully within our technical system. We're also giving us the ability to dive into the operations of our technical system during runtime with something like a logging framework. We're introducing quality through the utilization of our integrated toolset testing. With MuleSoft, MUnit is fantastic for this. We can create tests that specifically test targeted components and provide us stability and results. And finally, when we consider our error handling framework, is that when they occur, that we are making sure that the details that are important to issue identification are recorded and passed along, so that when an instance occurs that is unhandled, we have the information and that we are reducing the possibility of that happening. Finally, in our issue prevention little runaround here is implementations outside of our system. When I'm speaking about this, I'm talking about components that are external to our core system and the implemented functionality and the tool provided to do this. Why is it important? Is that when an implementation for issue prevention exists outside of our core system, we are providing the ability for it to be up while we are experiencing an outage or an issue. And more often than not, these implementations extend or enhance the tool set that we have. Some examples of this would be logging aggregators. Logging is something standard within most development languages and platforms, but an aggregator such as Splunk or Elk or Datadog, for example, allows us to be able to do more with our logs. Things like application monitoring, New Relic, App Dynamics, SolarWinds, Anypoint monitoring. These are tools that give us insight into our applications and what's occurring. Things such as testing tools and test automation, Newman and Postman, JMeter, Fortress API, etc. So when we're introducing these systems, we are enhancing the information that we have during our issue identification. Logging aggregators can give us a very complete view of a transaction as it passes through not only our integration layer, but maybe across those system boundary layers. When we look at external implementations, again, is that we are able to create proactive monitoring, for example. With application monitoring, we can say that, hey, we have a threshold of this percentage of CPU utilization and this percentage of memory utilization. And we know when it starts to go beyond there, we're going to possibly run into an issue. And that allows us to be proactive in what it is that we are doing. And more specifically, when we look at our testing tools as an example, and the automation to run these tests, is that we can validate our system functionality and stability without having a human cost or human intervention. Again, repeatable behavior, repeatable results. And this is going to reduce the possibility of an issue being introduced into a critical environment. So, where do we go from here? This framework is not comprehensive. The points that I've kind of discussed here are meant to be a framework, meant to be a discussion point, meant to kind of bring up that conversation with your team, with your client, with your leaders. I want you to take this. You can use all of it, you can use part of it, you can use none of it, but mostly what I hope this is kind of giving you is just some thought-provoking discussion with others. Start talking with your team, start talking with your leaders, your organization, people outside of your core team. What is painful and what can you do better? And work together collaboratively. Draw pretty pictures. I used to make fun of my principal architect previously and tease him about all the pretty pictures he would draw. However, it does have value. When you start to draw these things out, you start to write things down. It starts to just kind of create an engaging environment. One thing that I truly do miss about being in the office is having a 8-foot by 10-foot whiteboard. Love the thing. And kind of some quick housekeeping stuff. So I owe you some things. Unfortunately, due to my configuration and definitely a lack of caffeine, my little demo lab was not available. I will be working on getting that up over the next couple of weeks, and I will be passing the documentation, the infrastructure configuration, and the code repositories to you through some links. I will have them hosted on some public repositories. The last thing that I hope to have available as well for this is I had scripted a lot of breakages to kind of occur through various means to kind of offer a little bit more of an interactive experience. And so I want to be able to offer this to you to kind of create a little bit of an experiment lab for you to test out these theories and test out these tools and see what works for you. This little demo lab I built has a little bit of AWS infrastructure all within the free tier, Slack, and the components for MuleSoft is a system API for each of these endpoint systems, a single process API, and experience API, which allows you to basically trigger a quick and dirty data synchronization. However, that quick and dirty data synchronization can have a lot of things go wrong with it. And that was kind of the intent, is that you can simulate a breakage and figure out, hey, I don't have anything here. What can I add to make sure that I can identify this? Most of all, folks, thank you for your time. I am long-winded. This went far longer than I thought it was going to. And yeah, please ask me some questions. I will gladly answer what I can.
Graham, that was great. Yeah. So any of the folks listening, if you have questions, put them into the chat and we will answer any questions you have. And so while that's going on too, we're going to finish around, we're scheduled to finish at 1. However, we have a few prizes we can give away. And Graham, if you think up a few questions, we're going to find a few folks who can answer some questions in the chat, and we'll put their names along with some names who can answer some questions from the intro part that I delivered, and then we'll spin a wheel. So think up a few questions. What I think is helpful is that your presentation was questions and answers, so that should be relatively easy. Hopefully, not putting you on the spot. Okay, so just from my part of the presentation, folks. What is the video series name that I shared a video from? So there's an easy. We're going to all start with the softball. What was the video series name? Friends of Max. So Brittany, good job. All right. So the next question is, what is the name of the event? Oh, let me make it a little easier, not a little more difficult. What is what is the date of the Dreamforce event? It's a free online event. What is the date for that? September 20th. Yeah, 21 to 23. Yep, that is the answer to that. So very, very good. All right, our last question. And so that again is September 21, 23, and is a free event. So there's no charge online event. You can watch and consume as much free online training from it, whatever you make time for. All right, so third question is, how much does MFA cost? Right, very good. 0. It's free. So we have 3 names. And Graham, you have your questions ready?
Yeah, I do.
All right.
As I kind of covered in our lovely rambling, or my lovely rambling at least, is what are 2 of the drivers when we're working with production issues? Or maybe what are 2 of the costs? When we consider production issues, what are 2 examples of costs of a production issue? Yep, that is correct.
Money and time. That's correct.
Yep.
So first to get it was Paracoda. Yes.
Yep.
All right.
When we are considering communication, what are 2 things to kind of remember? Yep, Devesh, I think that's a good one. And maybe maybe a little bit more of a painful one, as you guys had to kind of sit through the whole discussion, as what are kind of the 3 common tools that showed up when we're talking about issue identification? And VJ, thank you. You nailed that one.
And so we have 5 names. And Graham, do you have another question? We can add a 6th.
Did you get VJ Kaluth there?
Yeah. So let's see. Yes. Let me. So there's 5 names. Was there a 6th name yet that I didn't see?
I don't think so.
If you have another question, good. For sake of time, we can keep moving forward with what we have.
I mean, yeah, I can go through another one really quickly. Here is, what are the 2 types of fixes that I discussed? Yep.
Very good. So that's 2 answers the Vicious has. So we'll find out who can copy paste the fastest. Okay.
Nice, Mike.
That'll be a manual for that one.
Very good, Emmanuel. All right. All right, so those are the 6 names. It looks good. Everyone good with this? Yep. All right, let's spin. So paste those and spin. Dakota, congratulations. All right. And then the next. Emmanuel, our fastest copy paster. Just kidding. last winner. Oh. Visit. All right. All right. Well, you're all going to get a email from Jim. Jim will have details and follow up with how you can get the free, I believe it's a training session or a certification session. It's one or the other. All right. So thank you very much. And thank you, Graham. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.